What is something that makes you say, man, I really hate people? Student paramedic in the UK here. For context, you don't pay for healthcare in the UK, including the ambulance service. We often have patients who will ring us up and say over the phone things like, I have chest pain. Chest pain is a high priority case and often gets dispatched as quickly as possible. But upon arrival, they will tell us, I never said I had chest pain. Yet we ring and ask for a transcript of the conversation, and there it is. Most of the time, we have to take them into hospital to check they're okay, just in case there are any heart or lung problems. But people will lie to get things seen quicker through the emergency pathway. But people will get us out for anything because they can't be bothered to drive themselves or pay for a taxi or get public transport or wait to see their family doctor. You can leave people at home and tell them you won't take them, but if they ring back, another crew will be sent out, or even worse, something bad could actually happen and you're stuck with the liability. It makes me so annoyed that people see it as a taxi and not as an emergency service. But let me clarify, this is a small number of people, but they're definitely there. This is a minority of people who do this. All of my patients are treated with dignity and respect. I know each and every one of them, no matter how dire the circumstances, will be treated fairly and equally for their condition with a care plan to look after them after they leave hospital. The NHS has saved my life and countless others and takes a small sum out of my taxes at the end of the month, without the worry that I need to fork out for insurance. For all the comments for American and other EMS colleagues from around the globe, you guys are rocking it, by the way. Keep up the stellar work. The situation is similar in their work. People just don't pay as a result of your insurance premiums going up, and to pay the difference, in the end, everyone pays for everyone else. Please don't let this put you off calling an ambulance. If you are genuinely worried about yours or someone's health, call us up. We'd rather arrive and find it was nothing than be called when you're at your worst. Just give us some snacks. Hopefully, after people hear about this, they might actually follow. Story 2. After working as a critical care nurse for years now, you might assume that it would be the countless users of IV substance misuse or people with drinking problems that I treat in the MICU who wear me down. But surprisingly, it's not my patients who make me feel this way, it's their families. I understand that most of the time people are deeply concerned and worried about their loved ones. They don't want to face the possibility of losing a parent, a grandparent, or someone else close to them. It's natural to want to do everything possible to keep them alive. A 95-year-old grandmother comes in with severe difficulty breathing. We ask her directly if she would want to be intubated if it becomes necessary, and she clearly says no. She doesn't want any interventions like intubation or CPR. She knows what her body can handle, and she doesn't want to endure that. Unfortunately, the family often doesn't respect the patient's decision. So we end up intubating her against her wishes, but the sedation needed for intubation causes her BP to fall. So now we have to start her on pressors to keep her BP up. Then, as if that wasn't enough, she develops pneumonia. We have to load her up with antibiotics, but it's too late. She's already gone septic. Now we're dealing with septic shock, which means even more pressors to maintain her BP. We gently suggest to the family that it might be time to stop the treatments and focus on making her comfortable, to let her go with dignity without further suffering. But often they refuse to accept that reality. They dig in their heels, ignoring our years of training, experience, and the suffering their loved one is enduring. So when the inevitable happens and she codes, we're left with no choice to perform chest compressions. I know this was a long rant and I apologize, but I just got off an overnight shift where this very scenario played out yet again. It happens so often, and each time it does, please, when the time comes, let us just provide comfort and peace. Story 3. Grandma had recently been operated on at her foot, after which she was confused for several days but then recovered. The doctor then told her, because he legally had to, that she had the right to do a security operation, as they were unsure whether they got all of the tumor out and advised against it, as he thought it likely she would not recover a second time. My aunt, who, might I add, had been on holiday when Grandma was all confused and exhausted, then pushed her into doing that procedure so she would not have to worry about the tumor again in 5 or 10 years. So she did, and her body recovered, but her brain didn't. After a week of this, we called all of her other daughters who lived on the opposite side of the country to inform them of what was going on with their mother. One of them could not stand how condescending we were to her mother, who was, at this point, accusing my mother of locking her up in the night and stealing keys that were right in front of her. Fast forward to next week, my mom and my aunt are in a big fight over putting all of my grandmother's medicine next to her bed, which at this point was potentially harmful when taken together so that she could take them on her own. My mother was fiercely against it, but my aunt did it anyway. The next day, my grandmother had to be driven to the hospital in the morning. Her usual doctor blew up at my aunt about charging her if she interfered with grandma's meds again. Aunt never did that again but continued to overestimate my grandmother's abilities, acting like grandma was going to live forever. But everyone else saw the writing on the wall at this point. She passed away in the middle of the night 3 months later. Yeah, and when she said she wanted it easy, but they chose the hard way anyway. Sorry, Grandma. Story 4. When I was young, I had a lot of patience with fool people because I thought they just hadn't been taught properly. But in the last 20 years, I've found that tolerance has gradually lowered to a point where I simply cannot stand them. I hate people who are too lazy to think for themselves. I don't need them to agree with me. I just need them to have reasons that they've thought through themselves, reasons that they can, reasonably defend when questioned, that don't make them sound like parrots repeating exactly the same thing they heard elsewhere, the same word-for-word statements made by countless other parrots. These are the same people who distrust anyone who does value education, who value the word of experts, like a flat earther is always trying to reprove the shape of the world and dismissing the results when it proves roundness. If they used quote-unquote unique methods to try and prove their point, I'd at least respect their drive to question authority and learn for themselves. That's admirable, but no, instead they use the tools of science to disprove the scientists, which means that it's not science they distrust, as many claim. They simply think themselves smarter than the actual scientists and experts. I'm not saying experts aren't ever wrong. Over the course of my life, I've been proven right about a few things that made zero sense to me as a young girl. But those were things where the experts forgot to apply their own methods because what they were taught in school was so set in stone they overlooked the flaws. Or where, looking back, other experts were able to point out the flaws in the original method, flaws which invalidated all the results and assumptions made from those results. Story 5. I work in retail and honestly, that alone says a lot, but beyond the jokes and cliches, the reality of the situation is much more serious and disheartening. There's a high school student getting a job hoping to earn some side cash and gain some work experience. Instead, they face disdain from those who view retail as beneath them and believe the customer is always right, even when they're clearly mistaken. Another college student finds a job that he enjoys with a company that he would actually like to move up in, gets a mouthful from supposedly old men at his 40s, who yell at him for price changes, product recalls, warehouse misplacements, and other reasons that they may be behind their favorite coffee creamer being out of stock. He wears the uniform, he bears the blame. And this 26-year-old manager, beloved father and brother, works so hard to help his coworkers and never spends a minute in the office or at a desk. Instantly regrets coming out of the office when he's met by a customer who wishes to speak to a manager about having to spend 2 extra minutes in line at the registers. Customers then proceeds to guilt trip him and call him a sleazy, no-good loser before lecturing him on customer service. There's an old saying that somebody told me when I was younger. Watch how somebody treats a cashier or waiter. That will tell you all you need to know about them. Story 6. I'm in car sales and honestly, I find myself repeating that to myself. I'm not even sure where to begin, but here we go. First off, let's talk about the customers who have the audacity to get mad at me when they don't get a $20,000 discount on a $40,000 car. I mean, really? Who do you think you are asking for a 50% discount? Blows my mind. And then they repeated in my face about it, acting like I'm the bad guy in this whole scenario. I'm just doing my job, and yet here they are raising their voices and acting like I've personally betrayed them. It's exhausting. Then there are those customers before they even leave the dealership claiming that no one talked to them. Come on, it's a Saturday, and every sales consultant is running around like a chicken, sweating while trying to juggle plenty of customers at once. And these folks just sit in the corner of the store, expecting us to magically know they're here and in need of assistance. If you want help, make yourself known. Just ask someone politely, who can I talk to in sales regarding a vehicle I'm interested in? Instead, they just sit there, pouting by the coffee machine, waiting for us to hawk them down. I also encounter customers who completely lose it when they don't understand the 2 specific discounts can't be combined because that's just how the program works. For instance, I can't stack a military discount and a USAA discount. It's one or the other, so you pick the bigger one. Last night, I had this woman complaining, insisting that other places could combine discounts. And let's talk about the customers who expect retail-level value for their miracle trade-ins. Come on, man, your car has a check engine light on. You've driven more miles than the average person, and sure, it looks spotless, but guess what? It's 5 or more years old. There are 5 generations of new cars that have come out since yours. Sorry, not sorry, that your car isn't worth what you thought it was. People have such unrealistic expectations of how much their car is really worth. I can't even count how many times I've seen customers leave unhappy after I give them the first value. Your pristine 1999 Porsche is not worth the $80,000 it once commanded. Let's not forget the little annoyances of the job, like when people don't put on their blinkers and cut me off. A little courtesy goes a long way, and don't even get me started on being stuck in a tight space with someone who reeks. That's a whole level of suffering I didn't sign up for. Finally, I can't stand working with people who are nothing but negative all day. It's beyond annoying. Their pessimism drains the energy out of the room and makes the work environment unbearable. I get it. We all have our off days. Story 7. I'm late to the party, but let me tell you about my life in retail. The chaos is unreal. Recently, we had this insane promotion, an additional 70% off on items that were already marked down. But with great deals come even greater madness. People turned into straight-up animals, and it was impossible to keep up with the mess they created. By the end of the night, it felt like a tornado had struck the store. There were 9 double-rolling racks filled to the brim with items, clothes picked up off the floor, flung over racks, and hidden in the most random places. I spent hours just cleaning up after them, sorting through piles of clothing that looked like they had been through a wrestling match. It felt like I was trapped in an endless cycle of chaos, and just when I thought I was making progress, another wave of customers would come in and I'd have to start all over again. Every single day, I find myself arguing over store policies. No, Karen, I'm not taking back a swimsuit you bought 3 months ago. And don't even get me started on the hygiene problems. People open packages that are sealed for sanitary reasons, leaving the mess behind for me to clean up. Then there are the customers who treat the store like their personal playground. Kids run everywhere, knocking over displays, while parents are blissfully unaware or simply uninterested in managing their behavior. I've lost count of how many times I've had to pick up after them. Broken items, spilled drinks, and trash left hidden in the most unusual places. And the best part, when people stroll in just 5 minutes before closing time, expecting to shop for 20 minutes while I'm desperately trying to lock up. They get mad when I can't let them into the fitting room because we've been closed for the last 15 minutes. Yeah, retail, obviously enough, right, is infuriating. Story 8. People who have dogs and don't take care of them. I have a coworker that has a Labrador Retriever and he keeps it in a kennel in his garage all day and all night. He lets him out, twice a day to use the bathroom? The dog has lived almost his entire life in that kennel, about 23.5 hours a day for 8 years. Supposed to be a hunting dog, but this guy rarely does that. I also cut grass at a park in the neighborhood. The grass and the playground are basically a vacant lot in between 2 houses. The house on one side of the park has a poor pit bull tied up with a chain that's too tight and not very long. He has a water bowl and his food in a doghouse. He has never left that tree. I've never once seen a dog interact with it. His tail hangs low in between his legs and looks like he's been hurt because of his flinching and dropping low to the ground when you come near him. My dogs are part of my family. I know there are a lot of people out there that don't share that sentiment. The neglect I have seen towards animals and dogs in particular makes me hate people. I don't deserve dogs. They are really faithful and noble creatures. Story 9. Working at a veterinary clinic, I can totally relate as it applies to the way people can be so self-serving at the end of their pets' lives. Like, no, you probably shouldn't pursue chemotherapy for your old cat who also has diabetes and renal failure. Let the cat be comfortable with palliative care and do the right thing when its quality of life is clearly diminished. People seem to want to treat unbeatable illness out of guilt or pride, but really you are potentially just putting your pet through more misery. You know your pet's best, but also your veterinarian is not going to suggest euthanizing your beloved pet just because they're bored or ran out of things to do that day. The subject of it is broached only when it becomes clear that there is a degree of suffering that isn't going to get better. Please forgive yourselves for doing right by your ailing pets. Peace be with you. Story 10. I work in retail, so I've seen my fair share of Karens and other entitled people. However, one particular incident sticks out in my mind. I was working as a courtesy check both ACC and as a cashier, so it changed day to day and it was pouring. My coworker, who we will call Anne, and I were supposed to be pushing carts, but our manager told us to stay inside because of the lightning and the risk of hypothermia. So we were talking and working on other tasks when the rain slowly went down. Everyone was super understanding and nice since they were also stuck in the building. The rain finally passed, and Anne and I were getting ready to go outside when this man in a suit and tie walked up to us and said, "Excuse me, where are the carts?" in the most condescending tone. Keep in mind, the rain had stopped for about 3 minutes, so this guy had probably sat in his car, waited for the rain to stop, then walked into the building. And here's a perfect example of some people just really living in their own weatherproof bubble. Story 11. Oh boy, have I got a list for you. There's a special place in my mind for the bad drivers, whether they're going too slow, being overly hostile, or just plain clueless. Then there are the parents dragging their very young children out at ridiculous hours of the night. It infuriates me every time I see kids in Walmart at 2 a.m. Don't even get me started on people who think yelling is the only way to raise a child or those who smoke around their kids. Puffing a cig in public, especially in no smoking zones where no one enforces the rules, is another pet peeve of mine. Honestly, smoking in general just gets under my skin. Animal offenders are a whole other level, whether it's putting firecrackers on toads or striking your dog. Both show you've got some serious problems. And while we're on the topic, littering is just as infuriating as are those who think they need to get wasted just to hang out with friends. Newsflash, we can have a great night without drinks. Tipsy drivers, no excuse for that trashy behavior. Then there are the willfully ignorant folks, proud of their lack of knowledge, and those who overestimate their skills. Newsflash, Karen, you're not God's gift to earth, more like one of his plagues. Speaking of God, people who treat their religion or lack thereof as their sole personality trait are exhausting. And don't even get me started on conservative Republicans pretending they're doing what's best for the country. They just enjoy hurting people and know it. And if you're feeling any one of these stories and are connecting with them, nodding your head in agreement, you know what I'm talking about. Don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 12. The city of Philadelphia alone intakes over 18,000 homeless animals into their underfunded, run-down, dark and dirty animal shelter, ACC Philly, annually. The public knows the state of the shelter is in, but take their animals there for BS reasons. I understand that there are circumstances where keeping a beloved pet is impossible. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the people who literally give reasons like, I'm going on vacation. These people are bringing their pets to a place that's terrifying for their animals. It's loud 24/7, and there's not enough staff and volunteers to keep each room clean, and not enough money to help the animals with anything other than rudimentary health concerns. I'm talking about how this shelter cannot afford RBC tests. In addition, pretty much every single animal will get sick due to a combination of unclean conditions and constant overpopulation. The shelter can safely hold 44 large dogs and 50 cats. I've never seen the shelter at least 10 over capacity in each category at any given time. The shelter does all it can do, no matter how quickly they move animals out, dozens more come in a day. They don't have the money, manpower, or even a proper facility to give the animals top-notch care. Sincerely, ACC Philly former employee. Story 13. I work in the service industry and most of my friends do as well. A few years ago, I was with some of my friends at a bar that a good friend of mine bartends at. His roommate was also there. She's a waitress and also one of the most conniving people I've ever met. Always trying to figure out how to get money from people. She'd buy groceries for the house without asking the roommates if they even wanted any and then demand that they pay for their share. Anyways, this night we were all there and in front of a group of us without a hint of shame, she calls my buddy over and proceeds to try to convince him that she shouldn't even really have to tip him when she's there because he's going to give his portion of rent to her at the end of the month anyways. Story 14. Wildlife Rehab. People who think that their Google research is better than a government-issued license and training. For instance, a person found a lifeless mother possum with her babies. They compassionately rescued the babies, then kept them for 2 months, feeding them kitten milk, bananas, and baby food. When they finally come to the center, the babies were showing signs of metabolic bone disease. A couple found a fledgling robin, so they kept her for 2 weeks, feeding her dog food, then brought her in. Well, guess what? We can't fix the damaged legs because it has already healed. For instance, a woman brought in a baby mourning dove, casually mentions that she's had the baby for 3 days. Okay, so what was she feeding it at the time? Nothing. So she kept this poor baby in a closet for 3 days without food and water. The baby ended up starved even though we were slowly rehydrating and feeding him. Story 15. Privileged customers who work in customer service think they know what's going on, but fail to understand that different companies have different procedures. One that comes to mind is Mappin/People's Lifetime Jewelry Protection Plan. $1,500 to $4,000 is a pretty cheap ring and necklace, but enough that the warranty would be worth buying. I used to get so many people thinking I was trying to squeeze $1 out of them when I offered it to them. I positioned the warranty, explained the benefits, and people still thought I was taking them for a ride. Anyone who has worked in jewelry knows that happens. Diamonds fall out, prongs break, chain links snap, etc. Speaking of chains in general, if you're spending $200 to $300 on a chain, still buy the warranty. It's for life and it's way cheaper than buying a new chain. Just having a repair pays for itself, and if you have any special event, we can get the chain replaced under your warranty. Depends on the financial institution, but working at a large bank, we'd offer disability and job loss insurance. That stuff is worth the money. If you're a young person getting their first mortgage and you know you're going to be hopping jobs every 2 to 3 years, or you do a lot of contract/seasonal work, then that insurance will pay for itself when you find yourself jobless and your credit score is protected. Story 16. When a person walks into a bar or a coffee shop or food place while talking on the phone. I work at a cafe and bake shop, and when you come in the daily, cakes and food and the bar are right next to the entrance, and whenever someone walks in while talking on their phone and I'm like, "Good morning," and I stand next to the fridge to serve them and they look at me but straight up just ignore me, then they talk and talk and talk and I have other orders. And when they hang up, they expect that it's their turn immediately. That really makes me go, I hate people. And I really am as polite as I can always be, never snapped at or yelled at a rude guest. Actually, working as a server and waiter will make you hate people very quickly, especially if you serve mostly rich and businessmen and their spoiled children. In my opinion, it's a deeply unhealthy job. Story 17. Litter, but especially cigarette, but litter. I use a cig too, but everyone seems to think it's perfectly fine to throw it anywhere. If I'm driving, I will stick my arm out of the window and roll the filter with my fingers so the cherry and excess cig flies out. Then I stick it into a little cup in my cup holder. It's easy and there are no excuses. American Spirit will send you little scent-proof baggies in the mail for free. They're amazing. TerraCycle will give you a mailing label so you can send them all of your ashes, plastic cigarette wrappers, and foil, even the pouches, and they will recycle them into other things. It's really amazing. Story 18. People driving, in general, that middle lane with all the arrows is for making turns, not for driving in the main lane and suddenly deciding to turn. Use the lane. Oh, and before you slam on your brakes to turn, how about using that little lever to give me a heads up? Sitting in a turn lane at a red light, and when the light turns green, you finally turn on your signal? On a 2-lane back road, I'm stuck behind 10 slow cars, and yet you feel the need to floor it, burn a bunch of gas just to get in front of me, only to be stuck behind the same slow cars I was. Can you not see the cars ahead, or do you only focus on the one in front of you? Then there are those who suddenly realize they need to exit, so they speed around me from the left, cutting across 2 to 4 lanes of traffic, only to be stopped at the red light on the ramp. And people who brake before putting their turn signal on. Lastly, when merging onto the freeway, speed up on the ramp. Story 19. Deal with a lawsuit and you will see the worst in people. I'm currently in a legal battle with my university and a group of students for being mistreated after filing against my offender when I was harmed 3 years ago. It's been a nightmare ever since. All those bad habits, I've seen it all from a group of people I considered my friends and a university I used to love going to. It's a complete nightmare. There's 2 federal cases going on. The school has been fined for some violations now, I believe. Another one might be pending, and my life is a total wreck. Story 20. I don't hate all people. I hate my people. Whenever I land home in America after visiting a foreign country, I remember how our culture has allowed impatience and rudeness to become commonplace. While departing Tokyo en route to Chicago, a Japanese gate agent who spoke pretty solid English got yelled at by an old American woman who said, "I still can't understand you." You're in her country and are mad that she's not speaking your language? Later, when we landed in Chicago, I was in the customs line and a woman behind me with a Saudi Arabian passport asked me if she was in the wrong line. In the 5 seconds that I spend looking around trying to help her, the line in front of me moves. Both the TSA agent and the people behind us in line scream at me like I have just damaged everything. These airports are many foreigners' first impressions of America and its people, and it's embarrassing. Story 21. I once had to do a callback to a customer. I worked for an optician, so all customer-patient information is confidential and is protected by the Data Protection Act in the UK. Basically, what the act means is that we can only speak to the named customer on the account unless they have personally authorized us to speak to someone else. So I call this guy back and his wife picks up. I say where I'm calling from and that I need to speak to him directly. She says that it's okay, you can speak to me. I explain that unfortunately, due to the DPA, I can't and will call back later if he's not available. Cue a nuclear rant from this lady that she's worked with the DPA for years and how I and she's going to call her lawyer and let me speak to your manager. So I transferred her to my manager, who told her the same exact thing. I wonder if she ever did call her lawyer. I kind of hope she did, as they would probably have laughed her out of the building. Story 22. I carpool, so I get to see other drivers more easily, and usually about half of them are on their phones. I even saw a guy checking girls on Instagram in a busy downtownish area, swerving all over the place. It's especially hard where there's strict cell phone laws to MO, where there's no real cell phone laws and rarely any enforcement out on the roads, especially during winter. We say almost daily, it's not a commute unless you fear for your life at least once. We also have front and rear dash cams in case one of these strikes us. 2 have tried backing into us at red lights. Fun times. Can't wait to move out of MO in a few years. Story 23. YouTube, Instagram, social media, influencers who make a living with thousands and millions of mindless drones, rooting them on, buying their merch, giving them advertising power, and imitating them. And to clarify, I'm not talking about all influencers. I'm specifically talking about ones who annoy and distress people, usually completely random bystanders, cause drama, and have a mindless legion of followers who support it all the way. Story 24. Maybe the system of how exams work isn't perfect, but that doesn't mean a classmate of mine who managed to deceive in some way with minimal effort deserves a better grade than me who put in a lot of effort. I'm not saying the educational system is perfect by any means, and it's far from it, but deceiving in an academic environment is kind of messy. It gives false feedback to the teacher for how to design future questions and how to curve the test and class in the end. Sports just feels dishonest in the same way. Being a fan of a losing team that only lost because of deceiving is next level. I don't really do many sports things, but I can't really wrap my head around that even. Story 25. A few weeks ago, I sat down with a new hire to go over her benefits. A few minutes into the conversation, she asked how long it's going to be. She proceeds to tell me she has left her sister's dog in her car but parked in the shade on a 90-degree day. I grabbed my laptop and I need to get this fool enrolled outside at our shaded break tables with the dog. I gently read her the act about never, ever leaving a living thing in a car, ever. I work in a hospital. This new hire is studying to be a nurse. Story 26. People who refuse to help themselves. I get people screaming at me because they can't do their important job that they are paid 6 figures to do because the POS computer we gave them doesn't work. Every time it's something stupid, like it's obviously unplugged or they didn't try pushing the power button. Like you don't need to be a power user to use your eyes and see that the power cord is unplugged. Take even a slight amount of initiative for yourself. Sheesh. Story 27. How some people have the whatever as long as I get mine mentality to a degree where they do it with pettiness. The people who want to argue with you when they cut in line at the grocery store. The people that cross the street without giving a care about traffic. The people who buy hype products just to resell. The people who rush to the front of the line at a catered lunch and then take extra portions to take home for later. There are enough people screwing most of us on a large scale. Now I have to deal with you taking all the Halloween candy out of the take one bucket just because you feel like you are more important than everyone else? Story 28. I'm a cart pusher at Walmart, and here's a short list of things that make me say, I really hate people. Parking right next to the cart corral but leaving their cart in the middle of a space or on a curb. Leaving gross things in carts like used diapers, bottles of piss, or underwear. Adding a cart to my line without asking, especially when I'm already at my limit, we can only push 10 without a machine. And not even pushing it in fully, making it impossible to steer. Telling me I should quit and get a more feminine job because cart pushing is for strong men. Refusing my help with heavy items, saying they need a strong man only for me to prove I can do it. The only time I couldn't was when they bought a fridge. The classic, let me speak to your manager. Okay, Karen. So many more. Story 29. People who purposely misrepresent social movements. Black Lives Matter was never about Black people's lives being more important than anybody else's life. It was about creating the realization that Black lives are equal to everyone else's life, and that we should treat Black people as such like humans. Then the movement was taken and turned into Black people think they're better than everyone else, and as such, All Lives Matter came about, or Police Blue Lives Matter, even though crimes against police have been on a steady decline for the last 20 years. Then the commercialization of the movement came and companies started making shirts about Cat Lives Matter, etc., and that just completely removes any legitimacy from the movement. It's purposeful, it's disappointing, and it's really just hampering any sort of social progress. If you help the worse off people in society, and that's not black people qualitatively, but quantitatively it is, the entire of society gets better. But instead, let's misconstrue the meaning, stay within our echo chambers of incorrect opinions, and continue to speak opinions that you would quickly find are wrong if you did a simple Google search. And people who don't move to the right lane, I move around them, then they move to the right lane after the fact. Story 30. Here is a specific thing that always gets me downvoted. So there are always criminals getting caught and then sent to prison. So far, so good. But I hate how their portrait is getting plastered all over the media very often before a verdict is reached in court. I feel like prison should be difficult enough without pushing the public to lynch them or to spit on them for the rest of their life. Also, people always seem to relish the misery inflicted on them, hoping they go without a chance for rehabilitation as if the perpetrator of a crime would erase the pain he inflicted to others prior to that. Don't get me wrong, criminals do deserve this, no doubt about that. But it's always a race for people to throw stones and wish for the worst, and every time I try to argue for restraint, I get blamed for being complicit. What I am saying is that I often feel like we're acting like animals. Story 31. Twitter, Facebook, Fortnite, people insisting you have any of them, people taking the word of known psychopaths at face value, people using terms like problematic and yikes to threaten people online for being politically incorrect, people hard-shilling anti-consumerism and PRC China, people who downplay government surveillance programs, people telling you to believe in Jesus when it gets difficult, Jeffrey Epstein and his child-hurting cult somehow getting off scot-free, Jair Bolsonaro letting the Amazon rainforest burn for 20-plus weeks until people notice, and he still doesn't do anything, among many other things. Can I be done now? Because, I'm so done. Story 32. Getting scammed. Yesterday, I made a post looking for a PS4. After posting, I offered $90 shipped and they accepted. After accepting the offer, they then said to go through Zelle instead of PayPal. I declined at first and did some research after finding that Zelle goes directly through your bank. I thought that I would be okay to go through there in case anything happened that was wrong. After sending the money, the person ghosted me. I then proceeded to contact my bank, which said they couldn't do anything, and to contact Zelle, which I then did to no luck. They said they couldn't do anything. So currently, I am down a bit of money and hope that no one falls for this like I did. Story 33. Cancel culture on Twitter. People will jump on a bandwagon of hate without even listening to the other side or wait for all the evidence to be laid on the table. First, it was Andy Signore who has receipts, then James Charles has the receipts too, Vic McNona, who is still showing receipts but are pretty good ones, Chris Hardwick, and most recently Pro Jared, who has a lot of receipts. Even with all of this proof, these people don't care. They don't really care about doing the right thing. It's all about their agenda. It's fandom mentality, mob mentality. Jared put it best on his video. Everyone hates cancel culture until they get the chance to cancel someone. Story 34. When I worked at Target, a woman came in with 90 coupons, and all of them worked except one that was expired. I handed it back to her and explained it couldn't be used, and she asked if I could just put it through. I told her I couldn't, but that the rest worked and she was saving about $150 already, hoping it would soothe her, but it didn't. That last coupon was the one she really wanted, and I was a fool. I called my manager over as this woman is literally screaming over this one coupon that I cannot push through without supervisor approval. It was over $10 and I'm panicking. Finally, my manager comes over, I tell her it's expired, and she just puts it through. The customer complained to her about me, and she wrote me up then and there, even telling the customer that she was taken care of now, ma'am, so don't worry. Story 35. I used to work for one of the big health insurance companies in the marketing department. They were so guilty of this. We had one woman who wore flip-flops to the office. About 100 emails went out that summer about flip-flops being prohibited, even though she was the only one wearing them. After putting everyone through flip-flop shaming for months, my boss finally told me they had confronted her, and she had written permission because she had foot surgery that left her unable to wear conventional shoes. How much time and money was wasted on the great flip-flop incident? The woman wearing them ignored the memos because she had permission. Story 36. Describing my dad's side of the family almost perfectly right here. The thing I don't get is that one of my aunts is a nurse, several of my cousins were in nursing school at the time, and they still threw all of this at my parents who'd actually been around to take care of her when they put my grandma on an amount of morphine that, You only give someone who is going to pass away. Well, yes, do you not see the constant oxygen mask and inability to speak without a debilitating coughing fit, let alone move from the couch? Do you not see hospice care paying multiple visits? I was in high school, and during the vast majority of these shouting matches, I could understand. Grandma's in pain, make it stop. Story 37. I'm from Minnesota. We have amazing forested state parks. You can be miles from a road or town in the middle of the woods and find an empty Gatorade bottle, wrappers from food. It's such a long distance that, you know how they brought a backpack? That's where it came from. But somehow throwing it on the ground was a better decision than putting the empty back in their bag? It's such a, why would someone be like this kind of moment. I hike a lot with my daughter, and I just keep a small roll of trash bags in my pack now. And we pick it up and pack it out. Figure it's better than just about it. My favorite is finding those wrappers for the $5 all-organic, cruelty-free trade honest energy bars. Right, you care so much about the planet, buddy. I'll pick up your trash. Story 38. Someone I know and used to be close to had a friend of hers passed away. They weren't really close at all, and she never talked about him, but since his passing, the only thing she does is rant about it and post about it on her social media feed, not in a way to pay respect, but she turns it around to make the guy's loss about herself. And the kind of person who takes their grief and talks about it only for people to pity them is pretty much everything horrible you can find in a person. We're no longer friends, of course. Story 39. All right, so bear with me. Four-way stops are the reason why I genuinely question the future of democracy. Almost every single time I approach one, I encounter the same types of people that make me lose hope in humanity's ability to follow even the simplest rules of the road. First, there's the person who's completely zoned out when they pull up. They have no clue who's supposed to go next because they weren't paying attention. Then you've got the people who don't care about the concept of taking turns at all. To them, the stop sign is more of a suggestion. They barrel through whether it's their turn or not because who needs rules, right? Next, there's the overcautious driver. This person is paying attention, but is so paralyzed by the fear of making a mistake that they end up taking an eternity to go even when it's clearly their turn. Then you've got the drivers who slow down to a crawl a full car length before the stop sign, making it impossible to tell when they think they've actually reached it. You're left guessing whether they're stopping, rolling through, or just taking a scenic tour of the intersection. And let's not forget the ones who don't pull up fast enough after the car in front of them moves. The car ahead leaves, but they're daydreaming or distracted, leaving this awkward gap that throws off the rhythm of the whole intersection. It turns what could have been a smooth flow into a disorganized mess of cars inching forward and people honking in frustration. It's truly baffling. Four-way stops are not complicated. At most, there are 4 directions to account for. Most of the time, fewer than 4 cars are even there at once. It's rare that cars arrive at exactly the same moment, but even when they do, the solution is simple. Communicate, make eye contact, or follow the rules of the road. And yet, for some reason, four-way stop seems to bring out the absolute worst in human decision-making. It's as if the mere presence of 4 roads converging at one point is enough to turn otherwise normal people into completely clueless drivers. And if you connected with any of these stories, for sure, here's more for you because YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video, and thanks for hanging with me on this one.